Global steel giant ArcelorMittal South Africa, of course, part of the global group. It was created through a merger of Arcelor and Mittal Steel in 2006. ArcelorMittal South Africa is the old Iscor, renamed when it was taken over by Lakshmi Mittal. It has a market cap of 20 billion rand, but made a loss in its last reporting period and paid no dividend. Of course, when Nonkululeko Nyembezi Hater got up, she didn't have any positive news to deliver to shareholders. And this is a stock where you can just see how it's been hammered over the past few years and hasn't actually gone anywhere.
Yeah, that period where you see the spike there in 08 was really a period where they were doing well. I mean, they made something like 26 rands a share of earnings in the year. Everybody was euphoric, very excited. It had run as hard as it had, right up to around 280 rand a share. It was one of those things that people were kicking themselves for not actually owning. Of course, then we have the global reversal, the crash down into 09, when the global financial bet means no one was doing anything. Everybody was basically destockpiling. Since then, it's been rough and tough. They've run into all sorts of obstacles. And the latest, of course, was the fight with their iron ore supplier, Kumba Iron Ore.
And that doesn't appear to have been resolved yet in terms of the new contract.
No, it doesn't seem to have been resolved, but they're a lot closer than they were 18 months ago, when it seemed as though there was going to be a lot of court action going on between the parties. But of course, that has an impact on their EBITDA margins. If you look at their quarterly report to March 2012, EBITDA at 8.5%. Back in these heydays, that margin was sitting at around 45%. And
their operating margin for the latest quarter 2, 1%. They're barely making anything.
Well, and
they were making a loss overall.
That's your steel price, but also iron ore prices have been relatively high. So there's been significant margin compression for them. And this is the time when a lot of investors will say it's a good time to buy, but if you're taking a longer term view, and by longer term I'm talking 5 years.
Yeah.
Well, look, let's just go back in history a little bit and talk about this company. So this is Iscor, founded in like 1928. They really put their shoulders to the wheel in the 1940s and 50s, when South Africa's industrialization and the requirement for steel for the gold mines was really on fire. The iron ore and coal deposits were in the sort of Vereeniging area. That's the main work still. The mines in Newcastle also then built a big steel plant there. And then the Saldanha plant, which is a stainless steel plant. So good assets. In the process of privatizing the business, they decided to split the mining assets, which then became what we now know as Kumba Iron Ore. And they were going to go ahead with the steel business. The steel business was regarded as the strong part. The mines were regarded as the retarded cousin nobody spoke about. Now the tables have been turned, and obviously everybody loves that because they went ahead and did the iron export transactions. But understand it's owned by part of the world's largest player. That's the ArcelorMittal group.
Good thing, bad thing.
Lakshmi Mittal came in here. They did a lot of cheap buying early on. Look, it's not a good thing because it means that you are at the tail end of their global operations. It's up to them to decide how much profits they want to make out of this plant, what they're going to do, how they integrate production from here into the rest of the world's supply. But, the thing with a business like this is viciously cyclical earnings always. So the point is you've got to forget what it's worth now and decide whether it wants to be part of your long-term portfolio in terms of those 3 or 4 years out of every 10 when they make a house full of money.
Okay, so this is a long-term play.
Very much a long-term play, but just to go to a point Paul made earlier, it was a significant part of the Mittal group when you looked at its contribution in 2008, and it has gone through its fair share of problems, especially now with Kumba Iron Ore, and that's affected profitability. But the Mittals also saw this as a bit of a cash cow, so they are definitely hurting in terms of paying off their debt when they purchased Arcelor. So one has to look at it in that context. They will try and take it back to where it was before because they certainly want to milk this cow again.
Management also dogged down by competition commission issues. There's been a new one recently, and again the CEO indicating that this takes away, apart from the fact that they might actually have to face a fine, this takes management's special time and precious time into areas that it might not deserve.
Unfortunately, like Telkom, they've always been bully boys in terms of the local industry, giving their suppliers as well as their customers a hard time. They price steel in this country by reference to sort of an international benchmark. they just decided that's how they were going to do it. But they benchmarked themselves against countries also like New Zealand and Spain, which have got very different characteristics to ours and no iron ore of their own. But that puts them in a controversial relationship with government, which doesn't really like them, even though they sort of spawned them. Yeah. Many people say they should never have privatized them, but then who knows? They would probably have done worse under public ownership. Here we go, now they sort of occasionally get fined, then it's sort of like fights around VAT claims and all sorts of things over the years. But then at the same time, it's sort of a strategic industry. So that means that people say, well, maybe there should be a state steel producer. You see that story coming back. I don't know, it's like a toxic thing.
But there's also,
well,
I mean,
that particular argument has died very quietly over the last 2 years, because if you just look again at the margin story, they're definitely going to suffer in terms of a state steel producer. And then you find you.
I mean, if they're not efficient now.
Well, if you go back to the history of Iscor, part of the reason why the Mittals ended up with it is because it was semi-state run in its listed form, and they couldn't make profits. Mittals came in and they increased efficiencies and made it a far better run business, and that's why the super EBITDA margins.
Okay, so a stock which is of course plummeted, it continues to fall back. It's down 61, 62% over the past 5 years. Right now, if you're a long-term player, would it be hot or not?
Look, if you're a long-term player and you believe China is going to bounce back, it's not going to have a hard landing or any such thing, then I think you do want to be in commodities, and you may want to be in the steel end of the commodity business. But for me, given all of these challenges we've talked about, notwithstanding that I am positive about all those other things, for me, unfortunately, ArcelorMittal not hot.
For you?
For me, it's hot, and I think we missed one thing, and that is that, you know, the fact that infrastructure spend in this country is going to pick up.
Very excited about the fact that you've given this the nod. Yeah.
I think it's certainly going to push through the channels, and the spending will come through. Yes, there has been a delay. People are getting frustrated, but ultimately that spending will happen, and we'll see the benefit
from the Mittal Group, overall group.
Well, it will affect the construction industry, and obviously the Mittal Group will benefit,
yep.
And you'll see the expansion of their margins. So on a 3 to 5 year view, I think it's hot.